Anyway, can someone send me a list of studies that basically prove we are hypercarnivores? Just want to read it, thanks. I don't need to. There is no studies showing that we are hypercarnivores. There is no studies that showing that we're vegans. There is no studies that we're anything, omnivores or whatever. In nutritional research, such studies don't exist. We don't have people locked in labs for all their life, or prisoners for all their life, being put on different diets to see which one will affect them in different ways and all that. But we do have archaeological evidence, which is completely different from the research in physiology and nutrition, because we don't have any such studies, Alberto. They don't exist. What we have is a whole lot of associated claptrap and nonsense out there. So the actual studies are based on the N15 data. I've talked about it. So has Bart. He's actually done videos about it. I've discussed it in a lot of my live streams. And it's pretty much that before agriculture existed on the planet, and in the glacial periods, which was the majority of our existence, so for the last 300,000, 350 odd thousand years, even a bit more longer than that, it's about close to about well over 1 million years, we've lived in a glacial period with 2 interglacial periods. So we're talking about glacial period, which frost all the way down to the tropics. So forget about finding any plants in that environment. Even the animals had to dig with their to eat the grass that's under the snow or under the frost. So very little, it was primarily green plants. That's it. Something that we don't consume. And everything modern is all domesticated. So it didn't even exist then. Even in the interglacial periods, it was a bit of fruit seasonal and a bit of tubers, and that's about it. Very fibrous tubers, which we sucked out some of the stuff that even tribal people like the Hudsons do today. So in that regard, and they are still considered super carnivores because they still primarily consume mostly animal foods, mostly meat, and it's only seasonally that they consume some of this other stuff. So they're still at least 2/3, if not 70% carnivore. So that's classified as super carnivore, anything over 70%. Hyper carnivore is anything over 85%. And, and so for most of our existence, we've been in that hyper carnivore state or excessively hyper carnivore, because we've got N15 data in the archaeology showing that our level of carnivory was even higher than Arctic foxes, wolves, and stuff like that, which are known carnivores. So our N15 data was ultra high in those glacial periods. So pretty much we're just eating animals, and probably medicinally using some of the sugar, some of the actual green plants, because in those glacial periods there wasn't a lot, very little. So that's the only research we do have, which is the N15 data and nothing else. And the N15 data now has, it combines with, it's not only in the nitrogen. So plants have nitrogen 14. When you eat plants and you get protein from plants, you will have higher levels of N14. Our ancestors were all super high in N15, which you can only get by eating protein from an animal. It has to be from an animal because it has a completely different isotope structure, and that's the reason we know that it comes from a different thing. There's only one bark tree that does have high isotope. It's one of those rare things in nature, and an antelope that actually consumes it tends to have higher, but that also eats grass, so it also has high levels of N14 and N15 plus, so it's a bit strange, but it has much lower of the carbon sort of markers, where we've got super high the carbon markers, which is the delta 13, which shows that we're eating ruminant animals, because only a grass-eating animal can give us that. And then we've also got the recent zinc of the teeth enamel of our ancestors. So the zinc stuff confirming that, because plants have very little zinc, it's definitely the source of the food was coming from animals to have high zinc. So that's all we have is archaeological evidence. We have drawings in caves and drawings around where our ancestors show the hunt. They don't show plants, they show the hunt. And we've also got, we don't see plants depicted on frescoes until we actually have civilization. That's when we actually see them. Prior to that, the only thing we see is animals being depicted and hunted in both cave drawings and drawings on rocks and stuff like that. They're all related to the hunt and nothing else. And also we have fires, that, and a lot of bones around those fireplaces where our ancestors lived. So there is comprehensive archaeological evidence to show that we were super hyper carnivore at different periods of our speciation. So for the majority of our existence, Alberta, that's what we consumed. It's only been the last, agriculture really started at about 3,500 BC with tillage. Prior to that, we still hunted a bit. We still had domesticated animals and stuff like that. Agriculture did not really take off. We had some plants in our diet, but not a lot, even at that stage, because you just didn't have tillage to get productivity. But once we got tillage, which was the Sumerians, and we're talking about now, it was around about, this was in the later part of the Sumerian societies, the middle part of the Sumerian societies, that we have, tillage developing fully, and then slowly starting to get into other societies in the region of the Middle East and elsewhere, and some of that knowledge getting to other parts of the world. Now, rice doesn't require tillage because they just they stick it into the in areas where they flood them. So it's a completely different method. So it doesn't require tillage, the soil. It's a different method. But for the Middle East, for grains, required tillage to really ramp up that production to get more plants in people's diet. And that was about 3,500 years ago. So it's about, from today, we're talking about 5,500 years ago, which is nothing in the history of our species. Most of the evolutionary changes and our genetics evolved at a time when there were none of these plants whatsoever. So zilch. And Bart's actually made a couple of videos, and he's actually put a link for the all you have to do is just Google the N15 and you'll find the primary study. I may actually stick it. Look, at the end of this video, I will stick it in the actual chat, the comments of this video once it's actually, and I'll actually pin it. So you can, Alberto, you can go and look at the study and you can actually read it. So the study does exist.